My name is Claire, and on April 18th, I found out just how dangerous it can be when a privileged heir believes obedience is his birthright. That Thursday morning began like any other. I was at my desk by 7 a.m., coffee in hand, prepping quarterly reports for our top client, the one who had pulled us back from the edge of bankruptcy the year before. Then, the door burst open. In strode Nathaniel Carter, all of 19, the CEO's son, and future leader of the company he had never lifted a finger to understand. He was wrapped in a designer suit that fit like an afterthought, his face red with outrage, the kind only a coddled rich kid can summon when denied. "You've been ignoring me," he shouted, slamming a fist onto my desk. "When I give directions, you follow." I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. I remained professional. "Nathaniel, I don't take instructions from interns." His face flushed with rage. "I'm going to be CEO. You'll regret this." I raised an eyebrow. "Then we'll revisit this conversation once you are. Until then," I gestured to the door. "Please leave my office." I knew that moment would cost me something. I just didn't know the fallout would start that very night. But to explain how we got there, we need to rewind a few months, back to when Richard Carter, our CEO, proudly announced a son would be joining the team for hands-on experience. Most of us assumed Nathaniel would do a quick tour of departments, get bored, and disappear back to a yacht somewhere. We were mistaken. Instead, he was given the title of Junior Operations Director. Handed, not earned. A title I had worked half a decade for, through long nights and constant hustle. Nathaniel, meanwhile, had no clue how the company even ran. Yet somehow, he expected me to follow his every whim. At first I played along. I fixed his errors quietly. I rewrote disastrous proposals before clients could see them. I covered for his missed deadlines.
Why?
Because I was invested in my career. I believed in the mission. And perhaps I naively thought he'd mature. I was wrong. The last straw came 2 weeks before our confrontation. Nathaniel barged in and dropped a folder on my desk. "Fire the Johnson team," he said flatly. "They piss me off." The same Johnson team that had just locked in a $3.5 million deal. "I'm not firing them because you're irritated," I replied calmly. "I'll tell my dad you refused a direct order." "Feel free," I said, unmoved. He stormed out. I assumed Richard would talk sense into him. I underestimated just how blind privilege can be. That weekend was our annual spring gala. I was there representing the international clients, the division I had built from the ground up. Everything was perfect. Investors were happy. The atmosphere sparkled. For a moment, I believed merit still mattered. Then came the text from Richard. "Claire, come to my office first thing tomorrow." I barely slept that night. By 7:30 a.m., I was standing across from Richard's desk. He couldn't even meet my gaze. "Claire, I have to," he began. I interrupted. "Check your inbox." His complexion went pale. Because what he didn't know was that I had already sent him a file. Inside were 43 emails from Nathaniel, some laughable, others legally questionable. Orders to falsify delivery reports. Requests to manipulate financial data to make his projections look better. Threats like, "Do what I say," or "I'll end your career." Richard stared at the screen like it was radioactive. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Didn't you?" I asked. He looked away. Truthfully, he'd known something. But looking the other way is easier when it's your own son. Until the evidence is undeniable. He buried his face in his hands. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" I believed this company valued merit. I didn't want to be the cause of a family implosion. He looked up, guilt and fear clouding his expression. "The board can't see this." "I'm not blackmailing you, Richard," I said. "But your son barged into my office yesterday demanding I fire a team that just saved your company millions. When I refused, he vowed to ruin me." I paused. "I came to say, this stops now. The Johnson team stays. My position stands. And Nathaniel? He's your mess to clean up." I walked out with my heart pounding. It wasn't about revenge, yet. It was about fairness. About ensuring that hard work still held weight. But by Monday, I knew Nathaniel hadn't let it go. He started small, Whispers, leaving me off important emails, delaying my budget approvals. Meetings happened without me. It was calculated, death by 1,000 cuts. I caught him smirking as I walked past a meeting I hadn't been invited to. He even winked. People like Nathaniel think they can manipulate power like a game. But they forget something important. Those they step on often hold everything up. 1 week later, Richard called me in again. "You were right," he muttered. "Nathaniel's out of control." "So you've talked to him?" "I've tried. He says if I don't fire you, he'll go to the board." I actually laughed. He's 19 and threatening the board. That's bold. Richard didn't laugh. "Claire, I have to suspend you temporarily. Just to calm things down." I gave him a hard look. "It's never personal, is it?" He winced. "I'll fix this. I swear." But I already knew he wouldn't. He'd cave to his son. He'd sacrifice me, the person who built his global division, because it was easier. I smiled politely and left. But what Richard didn't know, I had planned for this. When I walked out that day, I wasn't defeated. Corporate loyalty often vanishes when family's involved. But Nathaniel and his father had no idea what I'd been working on behind the scenes. 3 months before, I saw the signs. Jittery clients, strange reassignments, my deals being snatched from under me. Nathaniel was making his move. He wanted control over the international arm I'd spent years building, and Richard was letting it happen. So, I did what they never expected. I documented everything. Every email. Every meeting. Every misstep. Every client red flag. I had it all. But I wasn't foolish enough to keep it to myself. I reached out to 2 trusted colleagues, Marta Chun, head of compliance, and David Alvarez, senior legal counsel. They'd both voiced concerns about Nathaniel before. We met off the record over coffee. I showed them everything. Marta looked troubled. "Claire, this could wreck careers." David agreed. "If this gets to the board." "It has to get to the board," I said. "Not for me. For the company." They sat in silence. Then Marta nodded. "I'm in." David echoed her. "Me too." That's when the real work began. We worked late, cross-referencing contracts Nathaniel had botched, documenting compliance breaches that bordered on criminal. David wrote confidential memos about fiduciary breaches. Marta uncovered a special project Nathaniel had spearheaded that nearly violated international trade laws, something that could have destroyed us if I hadn't quietly stepped in months ago. So when Richard suspended me, I wasn't afraid. Because this time, the truth wasn't coming from me, it was coming from inside the system. And the board was about to hear everything. The board wasn't going to hear the truth from me. They were going to hear it from their own compliance and legal departments. But that wasn't the only leverage in place. The final, decisive piece came from our largest international client, Eastbridge Global Holdings. I had personally cultivated that partnership over the years, and I knew they were uneasy after a train wreck of a meeting Nathaniel had led without my involvement. So I reached out to Michelle Tan, their head of partnerships. We had lunch, casual, no pressure. But when I gently asked about their long-term contract plans, she didn't hesitate. "Claire," she said, lowering her voice, "off the record, if you're out, so are we." I blinked. "You're serious?" She nodded. "We don't do business with amateurs." That was all the confirmation I needed. So when my suspension was announced via internal memo, 2 major things happened at once. Marta and David delivered their detailed report directly to the board, and Eastbridge Global issued a formal letter of concern to Richard Carter, hinting, barely, that they would withdraw all future business if serious changes weren't made at the top. I didn't feel victorious. Not really. I just felt steady, prepared. Because Nathaniel had spent months trying to push me out with manipulation and tantrums. What he failed to realize was simple. When people have nothing left to protect but everything to defend, they become unstoppable. The email went out at 9:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. One dry sentence. Claire Patterson is on administrative leave, pending internal investigation. No explanation. No context. Just a clinical statement that effectively erased me from the company. What Richard didn't realize was that the Real review had already started. And it wasn't focused on me. By 10:05 a.m., Marta and David submitted their compiled report to the full board of directors. There were no dramatics, no vendettas, just an unvarnished account of facts. Nathaniel had tried to manipulate financial metrics. He had issued unauthorized instructions that put key contracts at risk. He had actively interfered with compliance procedures, and Richard Carter, whether by denial or design, had allowed him to continue unchecked. The document closed with a clear and firm suggestion. A formal inquiry into executive accountability and possible breaches of fiduciary responsibility is recommended immediately. By 11:30 a.m., the boardroom was sealed off. I wasn't in the room, of course, but Marta kept me informed via text. Richard looks 10 years older than he did an hour ago. Nathaniel tried to throw you under the bus. It backfired. The board's demanding answers. I read each update calmly. I hadn't leaked anything. I hadn't gone public. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. At 2 p.m., Richard called. I let it ring. He tried again. By the third attempt, I picked up. Claire, we need to talk. I let the silence stretch. He exhaled, worn down. We met late that day in his office. For once, Nathaniel wasn't nearby. Richard looked deflated, like someone who had been forced to finally see the damage he'd ignored. His confident executive persona was gone. The board wants to speak with you first thing tomorrow, he said quietly. I nodded. And he hesitated. They've asked Nathaniel to resign, effective immediately. And they've requested that I step aside while the review continues. I didn't react. That sounds like the right call. He gave a weary half-smile. You really pulled it off. You took him down. I looked him straight in the eye. No. Nathaniel took himself down. I just refused to keep covering for him. For a moment, I thought he might lash out. But instead, he slumped forward, hands trembling slightly. You were the best we had, he said. I should have supported you. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The next morning, I walked into a boardroom I had never been invited into before. 12 directors stared back, cool, composed, serious. But something shifted when I sat down. They didn't interrogate me. They didn't posture. They asked for my version. So I gave it to them, professional, fact-based, and measured. I walked them through the deals I had landed, the partners I had retained, and the disaster control I had quietly executed behind Nathaniel's recklessness. I explained how close we had come to breaking compliance on multiple fronts, and how, if I hadn't intervened, the company might not have survived. They listened, and they nodded. At the end, the chairman leaned forward. Claire, we'd like to offer you the interim leadership position for the international division during the transition. It took me a moment to absorb his words. I wasn't just reinstated. I was promoted. Even as I thanked them and shook hands, I kept my emotions in check. Promotions come and go. Titles can vanish. But real leadership, earned through trust and grit, that lasts. And that's something Nathaniel Carter could never manufacture. 2 weeks later, Nathaniel was gone. No farewell message. No company-wide statement. Just disappeared. Rumor was, he'd been sent abroad to handle the family's offshore investments. A soft exile dressed up as a strategic reassignment. And Richard Carter? He stepped down voluntarily, citing the need for personal reflection. The company issued a memo full of polished corporate phrasing. We thank Mr. Carter for his leadership and his dedication to a smooth transition. Translation: step away quietly, and we won't burn you publicly. On my first day as interim head of international operations, I passed Nathaniel's old corner office. It was dark and silent. His nameplate sat discarded on the desk. I didn't pause. I didn't smirk, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about safeguarding the people who had been working in fear, wondering how long they'd survive under chaos. I called my team together for a meeting. No victory speeches. No grandstanding. Just one promise. I don't care about last names or job titles. I care about the work. I care about ethics. And I care about respect. That's how we move forward. For the first time in weeks, I saw real relief on their faces. A month later, Eastbridge Global renewed their full contract. Not because we begged, but because Michelle Tan called me personally and said, "We want to work with someone who knows what they're doing." That's you. Other clients followed. Confidence returned. Deals closed. The company didn't just stabilize. It began to grow again. And then came the final chapter. The board invited me to a private dinner. I wasn't sure what to expect. But when I walked in, I saw it. They weren't looking at me like a fill-in anymore. They saw a leader. The chairman raised his glass. "Claire, we'd like you to take the permanent position of Vice President of International Operations, effective immediately." I paused, let the moment land. Then I spoke. "I accept, on a few conditions." He smiled. "Let's hear them." 1. No more nepotism in leadership. 2. Full transparency in executive decisions. 3. I build and protect my team my way. He nodded at each. Agreed. I signed the offer a week later. Not for the title, not for the raise, but to ensure that no one else would have to fight just to be treated with basic dignity. And Nathaniel? Last I heard, he was trying to get a startup off the ground in Singapore, throwing money at investors who saw right through him. Funny how that works. When your empire is built on fear and entitlement, it only takes one person who refuses to play along to watch it all fall. Looking back, I understand something now. Nathaniel tried to destroy me because I refused to follow his commands. Richard tried to offer me up to protect his son. But neither of them understood what true power is. It's not in job titles. It's not in fear. Real power comes from integrity, competence, and the people who trust you to lead them. And that's the one thing no trust fund and no boardroom manipulation can ever fake.